firsthand look at the mind, motives, and methodologies of hackers. Chronister has provided ethical hacking service, auditing, forensic, and training to clients worldwide. Chronister's expertise has been featured in many media outlets, including CNN, CNBC, CNN Headline News, ABC News of the World, Bloomberg TV, CBS, Fox Business News, Computer World, Popular Science, Information Security Magazine, well, let's say every peer article you can find out there. In his presentation titled Pain to be Pwned, Dave will discuss prevalent vendor-induced security issues he has found in public networks. His company website is ParameterSecurity.com. You can follow him on Twitter at
Bag of Mojo.
Bag of Mojo. All right, Mr. Chronister.
How's everyone doing? Well, first, before I start, for some reason, I always get the after lunch. And I don't know if I'm really hyper to keep people awake, or I just have a very nice, soothing voice so everybody can sleep good. But if everybody can give a hand to all the volunteers and everybody that made this possible. Mr. Jack Daniel over here, who founded BSides as well. Thank you very much for this. And then Adrian Crenshaw of Iron Geek, who goes around the country and the world recording. So, oh, okay. Okay. So I got two things going. So, in all seriousness, I've been in this field for about 10 years now. When I was getting into it, IronGeek.com was my go-to site, and still to this day is my go-to site. If you do not know Adrian, go meet him. And if you don't know how to lockpick, you will in the 5 minutes after you meet him. So, all right. Let's go ahead and let's talk about an exciting topic that everybody wants to discuss. Vendor management. This year was really difficult trying to come up with a topic, and I think Dave Kennedy actually said it the best. Last week he was on Facebook, and he goes, is anybody else having issues coming up with a novel topic? I think what we're finding in this field is, for so long, this has been the trick show, right? You come here, learn a new trick. Pop out money out of an ATM, make a telephone, I don't know, start to ring on its own or whatever. And the problem is we are not dealing with the fundamental issues of security. I mean, at some point, we have to say, okay, enough with the cool technical stuff. We need to get back to basics. It's really cool that you know how to do a SQL injection, but the simple fact that you don't have policies to be able to enforce anything is an issue. So this one, one of the issues I've found doing with forensics is I've found a lot of problems, as even in auditing, where people go, well, that was a vendor issue, or I don't touch that computer. It's a vendor's computer. It's an NT40 box on your network. We need to look at it. So we're going to spend the next hour looking at some of the things I have found through the years that really scares me about vendors. Now, the phrase, the vendor persistent threat, I did not come up with that. That's my buddy Paul Coggin came up with it. But unfortunately, it's a little too true. Quit worrying about the APT and worry about the VPT. Again, I just wanted to show you this. Thank you. This is my front yard 3 hours ago. My wife sent this to me. That's ice. That's not snow. That's this. Those of us that live up north understand this. I'm not too far north. I'm in St. Louis. So thank you very much. My back thanks you as well. All right, so a little bit about me. I am a security practitioner. I'm an ethical hacker. There are a lot of researchers out here, some in this room. They serve a great purpose. I just don't have the skill set or the patience to do security research. Everything I'm going to discuss is stuff I have seen in the real world. There's a lot of times when you do talks that people will come up to you and go, well, that's kind of scary, but How realistic is it? All of this stuff I'm going to show you I found in the real world, okay? So it's very realistic. And unfortunately, there's a lot of stuff I can't show you or I don't show you for legal reasons or as the keynote this morning said, you know, there's a certain line we have to, as ethical, we can't cross, but we know is there. I am an ethical hacker. Again, doing pen tests, I got into this field because I couldn't find anybody that would test my environment that either wasn't A, trying to sell me a solution, or B, just trying to make me compliant. I don't care about compliance. Compliance is the minimum you have to do to not get thrown in jail in many cases. And if you're going to sell me a solution, why would I trust anything you said as being objective? So me and my wife, Renee, who if you ever are around our company you'll meet her, short little demon redhead. She is the boss. She's the one that wrote that biography about me. Nicest thing she's ever said about me, ever. We decided to start the Parameter about 10 years ago. We do forensic investigation. Again, it was alluded to this morning, 42 states in the union require you to be a private investigator. It's a crappy law, but understand this. If you bring in a PI, a forensic investigator that is not a private investigator, your evidence was illegally obtained. Therefore, it will get thrown out of court. Why is this important? 3 of the largest forensic firms in the United States do not hold PIs. I love going against them in court because we just go, are you a PI? Nope. Okay, we want to throw this out. It's a felony in the state of Missouri as well as in the state of Florida to operate without a license. Instructor, some of you have taken my classes. We have Hacker University. I do some classes with Quick Cert down here in Tampa. I love coming down to Tampa. If you guys could get rid of your old drivers, I would move down here. I love it down here. We absolutely love it, but God, I just wanted to kill some people on the road today. Again, we try to make sure that everything that we teach is taught by people that will give you some real world examples. Again, it's not about the certification. Sometimes your HR or your boss wants that. You really need to know how to do your job, so we try to do a little bit of both. And founder, and again, I am not a solutions provider. I think when we first started about 10 years ago, that was called a boutique shop. And we very rarely found companies like us. We're seeing more and more spring up, Trusted Sec, Secure Ideas, Pseudo-Secure. It's a good thing. There is, you'll find that we're all friendly competitors because there's more than enough work for all of us. And we want to make sure that everybody's getting good testing and auditing done. All right, so let's just recap last year. A couple of the biggest breaches that we saw, and Target was probably number one, and that was actually 2013, wasn't it? Into 2013, beginning of 2014. Came out, it was the HVAC system that they got into. Interestingly enough, around this time, I was doing some work for my talk that I did last year, and I actually found where someone kept uploading to Dropbox. It was an IT guy that was upset because the vendors and the store employees were cramming all of their stuff into his little computer closets in each store. He was going around each one and videotaping them, and then throwing them up onto his photo bucket site. And so I have like 10 movies of 10 different stores in the United States of him that he put out there that actually has him putting in the code, walking through the door, and he even says what the store number is. So I just love that one. I want to meet someone at Target. Now, one of the things we have to understand when we're dealing with these breaches, someone like a Krebs, he serves a purpose. Unfortunately, I can tell you from a forensic standpoint, sometimes the media gets these, they'll jump the gun a little quicker than when you really know what's happening. The other thing, too, is that sometimes it puts a spotlight on these companies, which, let's face it, they may not have been the most secure, but unfortunately, they were just secure enough to detect this stuff to some extent. And there are other companies that are so insecure they don't even know. So I just want to say, I'm going to talk about two companies. I'm not picking on them. They're in the news. There are a lot more companies that have been pwned, a hell of a lot more than these two. They just don't know about it. So Target got a big hit. In St. Louis, we got Schnucks, which is our grocery store, got hit by this malware about 6 months before the Target breach. Again, one of the things that people forget when they talk about malware, we're talking Trojans. We're not talking usually viruses or worms. 3 different types of malware. Trojans, you have a human being on the other side. This is not just your everyday software that you may be able to detect. However, you have to install it. It's a program. And that vendor left the HVAC system wide open, which allowed the attackers to get into the environment to start to install their software. I was doing research last year, and I found probably 600 or 700 HVAC systems still open worldwide. Again, this is something we have to understand. These HVAC companies are not technical specialists. They are HVAC guys, and they just know plug this in, and you're good to go. It automatically works. Jimmy John's. Did you guys hear about that one? Jimmy John's was an interesting one that came up last year. Their credentials were a vendor's, the POS terminals vendors' credentials were stolen. I do know people that worked on the case, and the one thing I can say is we should take that S off of credentials. Their credential was stolen, which is a little scarier. Again, this was one of those that the vendor pretty much came back and said, well, we didn't know. It's not our fault. It was someone else's fault. It was your people. They should have changed it. Where Jimmy John's came back and said, we outsourced it to you. Now, again, it wasn't every Jimmy John. There's a lot of them that are not corporate stores, and they use their own credit card processing. But there was quite a few stores that were hit. We hear about this, but how prevalent is this? And what sort of vendors do we have to deal with? This is the really hard part when you are dealing with vendor management. Because the whole idea is we want a vendor to make us more secure. We want a vendor to help us out. We want to make sure the vendor's doing everything right. Back in the early 2000s, the aught decade, which we don't ever use enough of that word, I worked for a company that was later acquired by CyberSource. We created what became Authorize.net. And I remember I was a technical analyst there and sitting in with the developers and the head of development, and there would be serious security issues. And I will just caveat this. Everybody that works there was laid off, so none of them work at CyberSource anymore. Probably a good thing. Actually hearing the discussion, well, we don't have to worry about security. That's the client's issue. And then I remember when I was dealing with being on the tech support side. Well, if someone wasn't going to do something securely, why would they put it out there? There's a whole disconnect here, but how bad does it go? Well, one of my favorite stories on this comes from a software vendor. We did an audit for about going on 4 years ago. Now, this was a cloud provider who offered private cloud space to clientele. Now, they did not create the cloud software. They were just implementing it. And they came in and they wanted us to audit it to see, is it secure? What we later found out is they really wanted us to come in and rubber stamp it, which can be a problem of its own. So let me explain the problem that we were dealing with. Cloud architecture. Who here has dealt with cloud? I prefer the term distributed computing, but everybody uses cloud. So here's the architecture, right? It just works. I actually did that one time, and I had a cloud sales guy go, "Oh, that's good. I've always tried to visualize this." All right. It's more like this, right? Now, a couple things we have to understand is that cloud is designed to be secure from the top down, right? Not from the bottom up. Number one thing you have to understand is if you are in a cloud environment, if you cannot validate who has access to the cables or to that physical room, you do not have true vendor management. Okay? Can anybody tell me who has access to the Amazon web servers? Exactly. Okay? Cloud is not bad if implemented correctly. Unfortunately, we a lot of times deal with cost effectiveness instead of security. So, cloud's secure from the top down, but not from the bottom up. But we have these problems. We have these layers that span the different layers of the cloud infrastructure. Now, the one that we were looking at was the cloud computing management layer. Now, again, with this client, they offered cloud space to corporations. They were already in production. They encouraged their clientele to go 100% virtual. Move all your desktops, move everything up to our cloud infrastructure. They guaranteed 100% uptime. Okay? Yeah. The whole idea that that was illegal really didn't faze them at all. And that was the point I went back and went, can we get out of this audit? And unfortunately, I was dumb enough to go, we'll change them, we'll make them see the light. And they were using a third-party cloud software, and they were already in production with clients. All right, so this is what their portal looked like. Again, nothing too spectacular. Anybody here ever use Burp Suite or any sort of proxy? You'll know that when you are looking at a web page, if you actually look through a proxy, it looks a little bit different. So, for example, here where we see the actual computers, if we look through the web proxy, we saw this. Now, one of the things that we saw very quickly was at the bottom here. There's a customer ID. That's kind of weird. And I had one of my guys, Ben, that worked for me. He came running into my office like a 6-year-old girl, just screaming, "Ah!" And he told me, and I started screaming too. I mean, you would think we had like Bieber fever. Is that still a thing? You know, I don't have kids. I'm out of touch with everything. Well, what we did is, it was originally 21, and we changed it. We changed it to 1. And all of a sudden, we're seeing someone else's, ideally, customer 1's systems. That's cool, right? Then we start thinking about, wait a second, I bet you customer 1 is our client, all right? So then we go, okay, let's add our own user. So we have our users. We go to add user, and we changed it from 21 to 1. And we were now an admin in their environment. The thing to understand about this is the way this software worked. If you were an admin in organization or customer number 1, you were an admin everywhere. We grabbed the keys to the kingdom in less than 5 minutes. Okay? This was one of those vulnerabilities that when you find, you call them and you go, hey, we got to meet now. We have a major issue. Okay? To say that our clients were very happy with us that we found this would be a lie. It was very shocking. And I'll explain why. We started to realize exactly what we were dealing with. Number one, you have to understand they did not create the software. So the first thing they did is they called the vendor and brought the vendor in for a meeting. And it was a vendor that did worldwide deployments, but they were based in St. Louis too. We asked them, did you do secure code reviews? They go, no, it's built on Linux. It's designed to be secure. Okay, my client is freaking out. He can't sleep well at night. And we start dealing with that. And I'll explain. We actually had a little bit of an issue. But to give you an idea of what we were dealing with here, again, this was a vendor that was having problems with their vendor. And they were very upset that their vendor didn't check everything. They were also very upset. I kept using the word due diligence with them, which I found is a great word to keep using over and over. On their website, and I quote, "This is why we have designed our infrastructure with no single point of failure, backed with that reliability with a 100% uptime SLA. We have chosen to co-locate our data center and carrier facilities with state-of-the-art security. What makes us unique is our I can't say it's not laughing. Our unrelenting focus to security of our infrastructure itself." So I said, okay, how many data centers are you located in? 1. All right, this is the point. Now, I should explain to you the person I am going over the policies with is their salesperson, okay? Now, let me explain to you. Let's step back a little bit. They're encouraging everybody to go 100% virtual. They're guaranteeing 100% uptime. So I asked them, so what do you do with 100% uptime if you don't meet it? Well, for every 30 minutes we're down, you get a month free of our service. Okay, I know where your systems are. We're in the middle of Tornado Alley. I know exactly where you're at. This place was under 15 feet of water during the flood of '93. I go, okay, so what happens, hypothetically, you're down for 6 hours? I said, you're now giving 12 months of service away. There's a certain point where you're going to have some sort of issues. You can't rebound. What's your plan then? We'll go out of business. There's your guarantee. Well, what about the people's backups? Well, we don't back up any of their software, their data. People, they were in business. Now, what was very nice about this, I will tell you their name. You got that, Adrian? I can say that because they were upset that I made them where they could not feel good, that they decided not to pay their bill. So I got to sue them, which meant their report went into public knowledge. Do not do business with this company. They're still in business. But that's what you're dealing with. I can guarantee you if at that time I had went to their clients and said, they are not secure. Their clients would say, no, they have to be, or else they wouldn't have been doing this. Do you know if your vendors are actually doing security reviews? They decided to do peer reviews. The FracRags vendor, they decided to do peer reviews. Problem is they don't understand security. It's like two English speakers trying to teach each other Icelandic. So, just met one of my friends from Iceland over here. So, it just does not work. When you're dealing with, I don't care what it is, if it is important to your environment, if you're dealing with something like Microsoft Exchange, if you're implementing it yourself, you better be checking it. You better be validating the security. Has anybody ever asked Microsoft, did you do a secure code review on this? No! Are you kidding me? That's Microsoft way up there. I'm not even going to ask about Apple because half those people are just like praying to, the statue of Steve Jobs. But why not? Why aren't we asking them? Have you done your audits? I can tell you they have, and I can tell you if you would ask them, they would give them to you. But we're not even asking. So why would you ask someone else? It's a problem. Hardware. This is one I came across last year when I did my talk on obtaining sensitive information without breaking in. So if you saw that talk, you're going to see a little bit more. But it really scared me when I started to see the information that was sitting out there, publicly available, that people did not even realize was out there. Now, you get this simple stuff like this. Anybody know what that is? Yeah. This was a screenshot I took a week ago. The system date is June 26, 2000. You can't really read it here, but warning, potential problem has been detected with your system. Of course, it's wide open to the internet. I have found UPSs sitting out there, modems after modems, routers after routers that are just sitting out there. We ran into an issue in St. Louis. One of the major cable providers there back about 10 years ago when DSL started to come out, they were offering the wireless all-in-one modems and routers. And to make it easy, they would make your wireless password your phone number. And then they gave everybody an answer key, the phone book, which was great. I mean, war driving just spiked until someone there said, that's not a good idea. We've all used Shodan. We've all looked at stuff like that. But there's a lot of stuff Shodan, unless you know what you're looking for, is not going to show. One of the things I started to do is I started doing FTP scanning and looking for anonymous FTP sites. Now, I use the Metasploit framework. You can use Nmap, but I prefer Metasploit just because it only logs ones that are found, where Nmap logs everything. And I just don't want to deal with 7 gig log files. I'd rather deal with 5 meg log files. But it's pretty slow. It's about 300 threads a second or at a time. But what it will do is it'll actually go look for that anonymous FTP site, and then it will then give me the header. Now, my whole idea and the reason that I decided to do this was back before I started Parameter, I was the IT director for a bank holding company. And I remember our ACH company wanting a cash letter from us. And they said, just upload it to our anonymous FTP site. Wait a second, do you want us to password protect it? No, don't worry about that. Really? And the guy could tell my hesitation. He goes, we don't put DNS on it, so it's secure. Great. Awesome. I got to get out of this business. So I figured, I wonder in 2014, 2015, how much is still out there. Now, I found the typical, pirating sites. I found the typical, well, here's the University of Southern Florida, scientific lab, whatever. But then I started finding stuff like this. QuickBooks. That's not something you normally find on an anonymous FTP site. Backups to laptops. Now, this was in January of 2014, and this was about the only time I ever done research. I had the opportunity to go speak at BSides San Francisco, and it was my first BSides ever. And I was really excited. And just as San Francisco's a cool town to go to anyway, so it's like, okay, I got to bring out something good. Started looking at this, and I realized there's something weird about this. And one of the things I started noticing was the header. The headers were always the same. And a lot of times they had ASUS. I'm like, wait a second, that's kind of crazy. So, looked up the model number and went to Best Buy, and I found one. Okay, and I started looking at it. And one of the things you have to notice is right here, there's USB. It has that ready NAS, where you throw a USB drive in there, and it will create a network area storage. It also automatically creates an external-facing anonymous FTP site. I was excited. I was so excited because I get to go, and it was like it would be my second 0 day. It was the first I was actually able to publish, and I was excited. I was calling my PR guy. I'm like, okay, I'm going to be, BSides is on this date. I'm going to be there 2 days before. We'll announce it, blah, 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 blah. And one of my guys that works for me, his name's Ben. I talked to him about before. I call him Downer Ben because he always gives me bad news. He goes, hey, check this out. This was 2 days before I was announcing my 0 day. And I was like, oh, it was like Snoopy, walking away. Now, Dan Gooden, if you want to know how to do it right, look at how he did this. Okay, he discovered this 8 months prior, and he held it because he talked to them and said, listen, you have an issue. And they finally came back to him and said, no, it's a configuration. It's not a vulnerability. Half the people don't even know what FTP is, let alone knowing that they're creating an anonymous FTP site. So what all did we find? This is kind of the weird point where, again, when you start to deal with this, you deal with your legal a lot. And my lawyer really loved this talk because I spent a lot of time on the phone with him. And he was letting me know what I should and shouldn't show. And so I can't really show you what I found, but I'll tell you what I found. The second I show you what I found, I have some legal issues. Financial information. I mean, we're talking business, accounting sheets, QuickBooks, personal sheets, credit card numbers. I mean, anything financial, bank login information was all just sitting out there. Unencrypted backups. Again, you can get these backups. People, they're just being backed up to these NASs. I download them. I could restore them to a VM. I could restore them to something else. I have your system now. Medical records, PHI. I actually had to do a disclosure to a psychiatrist. I felt really bad for this guy. He was a private practice, and over 1,000 of his psychiatric profiles of his patients were sitting there on the public internet. And 1,000 PHI notifications is expensive, especially when you're a one-person small business. Unfortunately, I was required to. Intellectual property, amazing. How much trade secrets are sitting out there. Now again, this is not a secret. When I first got in here, I noticed a bunch of folders that were like AB, 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 AB. And realized what it is there's people that are out there that are creating files and creating folders. And they're using it to determine, is it writable? You'll see a lot of Nessus and a lot of Acunetics file artifacts there too, where people are scanning just the entire internet. People are doing it whether you want to or not. Passwords galore. I use that phrase because someone actually had a file called Passwords Galore. And there was a very large bank in America that their entire router infrastructure, their networking infrastructure, their main architect took all of the information home, because why not? And that included passwords to all their routers and passwords to all of their infrastructure sitting out on a public FTP site. I gave this guy a call. He thought I was joking at first, and I said, no, I actually found this. I want to let you know I'm not the only one that's seen this. You may want to take that off. And there's a real pause, and he goes, are you going to tell my boss? That's not my job. That's your job, man. So, political information, voter information. Thank God to know that in one state of the union, there are active voters that were born in 1870 still around. There's absolutely no corruption in the system. Actually found mayor of a major metropolitan system, a city, her personal stuff, had to do disclosure to them as well. And this is always a weird thing to do because when you're in this, like talked about this morning, is you're kind of doing something illegal, but you're doing it for a good cause. And there's a certain point that you have to say, well, do I let someone know, or is it worse for me not to let anybody know and just to let them continue to get hit? So we actually had to stop doing the disclosures, and I stopped actually doing the scanning because there was so many. I think at the time I found, in one Class A, I found about 3,000 FTP sites. Less than 100 of them looked like they were legitimate FTP sites. There's a certain point you go, I can't get a hold of everybody. So, very, very prevalent issue. Now, I'm not going to pick on just ASUS because, you know, yes, they are the only ones that automatically create the anonymous FTP site. But I did find other, a lot of FTP sites from some other manufacturers, namely Netgear, Cloudbox, and Linksys/Cisco. Now, they didn't, I checked Cloudbox. I actually went and bought one of these, and they didn't automatically create an anonymous FTP site you had to click a button that said share with others. And if you had UPnP, then it would automatically go and create an anonymous FTP site. It was very, very, I didn't even realize I did it when I clicked it because it's very convoluted the way they make it look. But again, people are buying this sort of equipment and they think, well, we're good to go. Well, no, your stuff is actually out there publicly. Well, no, they would never do that. Well, I did the same type of responsible disclosure to these companies as well. I kind of got the same responses. Most likely, it was because the people that actually were in the know, we couldn't get to. But still, we have to be very, very careful. And again, I've had people say, well, this is consumer products. Understand, 99% of businesses or 95% of businesses are small to medium-sized businesses. Their tech support is Geek Squad, right? They go to Walmart, they go to Best Buy to buy their stuff. They have to deal with the same breach laws that the Fortune 100 companies are dealing with. It's going to hurt them a lot more than it would hurt a company that has 1,000 IT employees because they don't even know it's out there. They don't have the cash flow, and they're just a sieve that's sitting out there. Has anybody heard of this yet? Yeah. I was flying here on Thursday, and I keep talking about Ben. It's like people think he's like my, I don't know, buddy. He's just, here's more about Superfish. Here's more about Superfish. I'm like, oh, yeah, we're all screwed, But this is a great point. And if you haven't heard about this, this came up a couple days ago, and it's going to blow up next week, really, on certain Lenovos, which remember, Lenovo is built where? China. If you are dealing with the Chinese and you think that they are not stealing your information, you're wrong. Nothing personal against China because it's nothing personal against you. That's what they do, okay? To them, the government and the companies are one and the same. And to them, if the Chinese, whoever is the first person in China to register something is the actual owner. Doesn't care if it was built somewhere else. They installed this adware, which is supposed to help you find shopping, better deals through the browser. There's actually arguments whether or not it actually would even do that. But one of the problems that happened was it would create its own CA, and it would refer to that CA as almost a proxy for you whenever you would do SSL sites. So guess what it would do? It would basically create a man-in-the-middle attack. It would sit in between your SSL connection and the connection of the server. It could read all of your encrypted communications. It's kind of a big issue, especially, why does a company need that to find out, which bubble gum or what diapers to wear? I don't wear diapers. I just realized that came out really bad. Okay. Temporarily removed. And again, it's very important to realize they are temporarily removing it until they can fix this issue. This is one of the problems you find a lot when you're dealing with vendor management. You will have people in the company that get it. And then you will have people in the company that don't get it. And unfortunately, not to pick on anybody in sales and marketing, they're typically not extremely technical, and they typically only see security as something that could go bad for them. They don't see security as something that could be done right. And so you end up with this thing of, well, these people are paying us to put this stuff on all of our computers that we're selling to someone else. It's easy money. Yeah, but that's a security issue. Not our concern. We're making money. We are giving the user a better experience. And at the end of the day, who gets the black eye? Lenovo. And I can tell you when this blows up, if you're using Lenovo, you're going to have someone in your executive team that's going to come back to you and go, hey, what's this? Are we screwed? Are we in trouble? We have one Lenovo in our entire environment, and we always wipe the systems anyway. And put fresh install. My wife's calling me up, and she's going, "Are we in trouble?" No, we're okay, hon. Don't worry about it. She does the sales and the marketing. Point proven. She won't watch this video. So, but it's one of those that you go, no, we're okay, but we didn't trust what was put on here. I mean, let's face it. If you're dealing with Lenovo, and again, until you can prove me wrong, if you're dealing with a Chinese company, and it's not only the Chinese, but especially the Chinese, if you're buying hardware from them, there's a really good chance that there's stuff backdoored in there, even down to the hardware level. Unfortunately, they're not the only government that does it anymore, and we won't get into politics there, but some governments that shouldn't be doing it are doing it, and it really just at the end of the day becomes more of an issue for us. So what are some interesting things, other interesting things that I find? Again, before we move on, every vendor you're dealing with, whether it be hardware, software, or some sort of professional service, you need to show your work. You need to show that you actually do things right. Vendor due diligence is good for everybody. An SLA is good for everybody. I hate to have everybody raise their hand, but raise your hand if you're a vendor. Nobody's raising their hand. Jack's not raising his hand either. There's a few. Okay, there you go. There you go. Here's the thing. I can tell you, number one, security sells. And we'll get into this. Do not be afraid of security. Do not be afraid to make something more secure. It will be more expensive. There'll be a lot of people that don't get it, but the people that do get it, at the end of the day, you are going to win their loyalty. And you're going to win customers. It's a good thing. All right. This was an interesting FTP site that I found when I was doing this last year. I was scanning in France. And the first thing I noticed is, well, it's in France, it's in French, so I don't speak French. My wife's Irish Catholic, French Canadian, so she speaks French. So she was translating for me. But number one, I found this thing that said agent surveillance log. I don't speak French, but that's pretty damn cool. And so I'm sitting here reading this stuff off, and I'm yelling downstairs to Renee. I'm like, what does this mean? What does this mean? She's like, what are you doing? I'm like, don't worry about it. So in the United States, we may pay a lot for our health care, but there's two things we don't pay for: telephone and TVs in the room. In France, they may have more of a socialized medicine, but you want telephone and you want TV, you pay for it. And they have a centralized kiosk. This is the centralized kiosk. The vending company decided, we may need to get in there, so let's just take the entire C drive, let's make it an FTP, the root FTP site, let's make it anonymous read and write, and have it sitting in the middle of the hospital's environment. That doesn't sound dangerous at all, does it? It makes HVAC seem pretty benign. Again, read-write access to everything. It's very easy now. I just put something in the startup script and I reboot the system. We're done. Now, with this being a hospital, we're dealing with safe harbor, medical records. We're dealing with PII. We're also dealing with PCI. This is a nightmare. When I called them, I actually had my wife on the phone, and she couldn't speak just enough good French, and the lady could not speak English good enough. But she got what we were saying, and you just heard her just start yelling at someone on the other line and just hung up. We didn't even tell her who we were. We didn't get to that point. Just sitting out there. One of my favorite are these video cameras. Video cameras everywhere. Everybody's like, yeah, love the video camera. I swear in security, we're all voyeurs in some way, and auditors especially. And I'm not saying that just in a sexual way. I'm saying that we like to be in other people's business. It's fun. So everybody's always liking the cameras. But kind of strangely enough, one that I found interesting was this one. With terms like champagne room number 1 and 2, I think this is an alcohol distribution center. I can't imagine it being anything else. But here's what was really interesting about these. FTP by default is open. These by default have a default password. And this company, they did good. They changed the passwords. But Telnet by default's open. So is on some of these SSH. Some of them, they just use Telnet, not even SSH. What really got me interested in this one was I actually found a file on another, that when I was doing a forensic investigation, another one of these that looked like this. And what I found really quickly was, if you can't tell what that is, that's a script for a botnet. It's actually for a bot. Someone had figured out they had Telnet access to all of these cameras. They also realized that no one looks at these cameras. And there's a huge botnet building up in these cameras. That was another responsible disclosure that was real interesting too. If I'm ever in Pittsburgh, I get a free lap dance. And I told my wife, and she goes, "You're never going to Pittsburgh." Okay. Again, we get these devices, especially these hardware, and I can't really blame the technician that put this in, because he's a camera guy or a camera girl. They do not get what Telnet is. They do not get what FTP is. All they know, here's a device, okay, someone can log in, we're good to go. What devices do you have sitting out there? What sort of remote access do your vendors have into their environment? What sort do they have into your environment? How do you know that they are protecting your environment as you want it to be protected? Are you actually doing vendor management? So, how do we do effective vendor management? Now, I'm going to be honest. This is not the fun part of the job. This sucks. I have to do the vendor management for us. And there's times that there's products I've really wanted to use that we couldn't use because they did not take security seriously. And especially if you are a security company, you can't work with that sort of company. So I have 3 rules for vendor security. Remember this when you are dealing with your vendors. Number 1, you cannot outsource risk. I've sat in way too many meetings where people will say, well, we'll just outsource it and we'll be done with it. Guess what? It gets pwned, it gets damaged, you're still in the hot seat. There's a lot of argument against outsourcing because of the fact that not only do I now have to still deal with the risk, I now have to deal with vendor due diligence. It's always going to be your responsibility. Even if they're doing, and this is the CISSP thing, transferring risk, buying insurance, it's still going to come onto you. Okay? They're going to just help financially compensate it. Rule number 2, refer to rule number 1. You cannot outsource risk. Got it? And rule number 3, I just went straight over that. I don't care what the salesperson says, you cannot outsource risk. I'm putting that in there because I deal with this all the time. Well, no, the vendor said that they'll take care of it. Yeah, of course they will. They sold you. Do you think that when this happens, they're really going to take care of it? Now, again, there are some really good vendors that are doing their due diligence. And there are really good vendors that are out there to help you. But you have to understand that at the end of the day, you will still be responsible for it. And if the vendor has an issue, even if they do everything right, you still have to report to your head-ups or your customers. And you have to explain why you went with them. And sometimes it'll be good enough, sometimes it won't. But you have to keep that in mind when you're dealing with this. All right. You need to validate your vendor's security on a regular basis. This is not a do it when you first go there. Some people do it every year, every 18 months. Be reasonable with them. There are some people that have gotten way too charismatic with this, and they want to see everything. I'm dealing with this with a client right now that wants me to give them a build of my mobile device so they can make sure I don't get any of their client data insecurely on there. Folks, my standards are you're not allowed to have customer data on your phones. We're doing auditing. We will never have their customer data on there. Yet their audit will not let us go forward until we show them a build of our phone. That's taking it a bit too far, okay? But have a nice middle ground. SAE 16s and SAF 70s do not cut it. Does anybody know what the one requirement is that you have to be in order to do an SAE 16? Anybody know? You have to be a CPA. Let that sink in for a second. You have to be a CPA to tell somebody that their computer security is good. You might as well say, well, you have to be a CISSP to do my end-of-year taxes. It's ludicrous. And again, I agree with the keynote this morning on this, that we need to start coming up with better ideas because most people don't even know that. And this is an industry standard. This is an industry that has a marketing problem and is failing. If you cannot get a user to change or your vendor to change, go to their salespeople. Go to a users group. I can tell you, you go gripe to a salesperson, they know the people in that company to get the change made. I know my salespeople show up at my door quite a bit, and I listen to them. And if you are not going through the right channels, go through these. If you have these clients these vendors that are not updating their materials or updating their operating systems, go to the users groups. When money is on the line, the company will change. I don't care who they are. And if they don't change, you don't want to have them as a vendor. I mean, that's as simple as it is. I don't care how cool their technology is. You cannot take that sort of risk these days. Some different things you may want to look at. Again, vulnerability assessments, pen testing, secure code reviews. A security awareness program is a big one. Are they actually training their people? And again, I want to make sure that the security awareness training that their developers go through is different from the ones that their secretaries go through. I want to make sure that they actually do code review, security awareness. Now, they don't have to be a security expert, but they should know enough not to make the simple mistakes. You want to make sure that if you get pwned because a vendor had an issue, it was a really, really good malicious attack. It was actually truly a sophisticated attack, which is a term we use a little too liberally these days. You don't want it to be credentials or something as stupid as leaving Telnet wide open. Also make sure if they are using third parties that they are doing their due diligence. The whole idea being, if you are requiring that the people above you, the vendors above you, are doing their due diligence, part of it is that they have to do their due diligence. It moves up the chain, and everybody is accountable to someone else. And that makes it a lot better out there. You don't have this whole rogue idea of, well, I don't worry about security. That's someone else's. And finally, if you are a vendor, understand, vendor management sucks. No one likes to do it. So you can actually use this as part of a marketing plan. You come to us for a pen test, we have our documents ready for your vendor due diligence. And you know what? That really helps you to get down to if they have to get 3 bids. You're one of those 3 really quickly. You're helping them do their job. And it really does show up in your balance sheet. It shows up in your sales sheet. And you will find, even if you are not a traditional security company, you will find because you take security seriously, your customers will take you seriously. Any questions? Everybody's nice and asleep? All right, well, thanks for having me out. You can reach me at dave.chronister at parametersecurity.com or Bag of Mojo. And we do have Show Me Con coming up in St. Louis. If you want to come on up, we have a good time. June 8th and 9th, Adrian will be there with bells on, and we go drink a lot of wine the next day. So everybody have a good rest of the day, and thank you.